What if some of the greatest war films ever made never made it to the spotlight? Imagine stories of valor and madness that vanish beneath blockbuster shadows. These are the forgotten soldiers of cinema, gritty, unfiltered, and alive, again thanks to streaming. Today we dig into 15 underrated war films you can watch free right now, films that history almost erased. Number 15, The Beast of War, 1988. When The Beast of War first arrived in theaters, it disappeared without a sound. Critics ignored it. Audiences were confused. Yet it remains one of the most haunting portrayals of warfare ever filmed. Set during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, it follows a tank crew stranded in enemy territory, hunted by Afghan rebels through barren desert and moral decay. Director Kevin Reynolds crafted something daring, a war film told entirely from the perspective of the invaders. Jason Patric and George Zunza gave performances of deep human conflict, torn between loyalty and conscience. The film exposes the brutality of blind orders and the slow unraveling of sanity within steel walls that become a coffin. When it premiered, it suffered from terrible timing. American audiences wanted heroes, not moral ambiguity. The studio feared controversy over its sympathy for Afghan fighters. The marketing collapsed. The film vanished from theaters within weeks. But decades later, it resurfaced online. Veterans and film students discovered its raw honesty, calling it Apocalypse Now in a Tank. Its stark landscapes, its philosophical dread, and its claustrophobic tension have earned it cult status. Today, The Beast of War stands as proof that even forgotten films can echo louder than blockbusters when truth is left unfiltered and pain is shown without glory. Number 14. Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, 1983. At first glance, this British-Japanese co-production seemed too strange to survive. It starred musician David Bowie as a captured British officer and Japanese icon Ryuichi Sakamoto as his enigmatic captor. The story unfolds in a brutal World War II prisoner camp, where honor collides with obsession. The film was directed by Nagisa Oshima, a radical filmmaker unafraid to confront cultural shame. His vision turned a war drama into an allegory about repression power and the human hunger for understanding across enemy lines. Bowie's haunting performance balanced fragility with quiet rebellion, while Sakamoto's own score bled sorrow into every frame. Yet controversy struck hard. Some Western critics dismissed it as too abstract, while Japanese audiences called it disrespectful to wartime memory. Rumors spread that Bowie's casting was a stunt. Distributors panicked, cutting the film's theatrical run short. For years, it drifted unseen outside film festivals until streaming brought it back to global audiences. Now, new generations call it one of the most poetic anti-war films ever made. Its legacy is one of silence and compassion, showing that sometimes the loudest message about war comes not from the sound of battle, but from the breaking of a single human voice saying mercy. Number 13. Cross of Iron, 1977. When legendary director Sam Peckinpah, known for The Wild Bunch, made Cross of Iron, he was already at war with Hollywood itself. This film became his rebellion against sanitized war stories. Set on the Eastern Front, it follows a German platoon trapped between Soviet attacks and their own corrupt officers. James Coburn stars as a weary sergeant who values survival over medals, while Maximilian Schell plays the aristocratic commander desperate for glory. What unfolds is chaos and irony. Soldiers fighting not for ideology, but for one more sunrise. Peckinpah drenched the screen in mud and exhaustion. His slow-motion violence wasn't glamour, it was suffering filmed with grim poetry. When it premiered, studios didn't know how to market a German-focused war film during the Cold War. American distributors cut scenes claiming it was too bleak. European critics hailed it as a masterpiece. In the United States, it sank into obscurity almost overnight. Over time, it found its audience. Directors from Tarantino to Spielberg later cited it as inspiration. Its cynicism, its moral corrosion, its unfiltered vision of men crushed by hierarchy, all ahead of its time. Cross of Iron endures not as entertainment, but as testimony. It whispers a terrible truth. Wars never end on the battlefield. They end inside the men who survive them. Number 12. The Thin Red Line, 1998. When The Thin Red Line arrived the same year as Saving Private Ryan, most audiences overlooked it. They wanted explosions and triumph, not meditation and silence. But Terrence Malick's vision was something different, an elegy whispered through the jungle rather than shouted on the battlefield. Set during the Battle of Guadalcanal, the film follows a group of soldiers as they navigate not only the physical horrors of war, but the spiritual ones. The camera glides through nature's serenity and destruction equally. Trees burn, rivers reflect corpses, birds scatter above gunfire. Each frame feels alive, yet dying at the same time. Malick had vanished from Hollywood for 20 years before returning to direct this. Studios panicked over his slow filming methods and refusal to follow scripts. He shot days of footage without telling actors what scenes would survive. The editing alone took over a year. When the film premiered, the studio didn't know how to market it. Audiences expecting a straightforward war film walked into a dream instead. Some critics called it pretentious. Others said it was the most beautiful war film ever made. Time has proven the latter right. The film has quietly grown in reputation, taught in film schools and praised for its philosophy of nature versus human cruelty. It endures because it doesn't glorify courage. It questions it. It doesn't celebrate victory. It mourns it. The thin red line is not about the battles we fight, but about the silence that follows when every voice has fallen still. Number 11. Stalingrad, 1993. This German war epic shocked audiences with its sheer despair. Directed by Josef Vilsmeier, it tells the story of soldiers fighting through the frozen nightmare of Stalingrad, where survival was no longer about loyalty or bravery. It was about breath. The film begins with patriotic zeal, as young soldiers march east believing they fight for glory. But as they enter the city, hell reveals itself. Bombs fall like snow. Hunger and disease devour hope. Commanders abandon troops. The camera never flinches, showing exhaustion and moral collapse in equal measure. When it released, it drew controversy in Germany. Some accused it of dishonoring the army by portraying soldiers as victims rather than villains. Others called it necessary truth-telling. International distributors hesitated, thinking audiences wouldn't accept a film with no heroes. As a result, it was barely shown outside Europe for years. Behind the scenes, production was brutal. The film crew shot in freezing conditions on real military ruins. Actors suffered frostbite. Equipment broke daily. Vilsmeier refused digital tricks, wanting viewers to feel every breath of ice and despair. Today, Stalingrad has resurfaced on streaming platforms, reaching new generations who see it as one of the rawest anti-war films ever made. Its ending is not triumphant, it's a whisper of futility. In its frozen silence, you can almost hear an entire century mourn. Number 10. Casualties of War, 1989. Brian De Palma was no stranger to controversy, but with Casualties of War he created one of the most emotionally devastating war films in American cinema. Starring Michael J. Fox and Sean Penn, it focuses not on the grand sweep of Vietnam, but on a single moral catastrophe inside a platoon. When it premiered, audiences were unprepared. Fox, known for his comedic charm, delivered a performance of haunted restraint as a soldier witnessing unimaginable cruelty among his own men. Sean Penn played his commanding officer, a man eroded by war into monstrosity. The film's emotional violence sparked protests and censorship debates. Some critics called it anti-military propaganda. Others said it was essential truth. Columbia Pictures struggled with the marketing, terrified of public backlash during a decade still nursing its wounds from Vietnam. It barely survived its theatrical run, yet critics like Pauline Kael defended it as the bravest film of its year. Behind the camera, production was turbulent. De Palma clashed with the studio over tone, refusing to soften its brutality or moral indictment. Fox later admitted he had nightmares for months after filming. The tension on set seeped into every frame, creating a realism too painful for many to face. Years later, the film found redemption through retrospectives and streaming rediscovery. Younger audiences now see it as De Palma's masterpiece, an unflinching study of conscience under fire. It asks a question few war films dare. When the battle is over, who can still call themselves human? Number 9. The Painted Bird, 2019. When The Painted Bird premiered at festivals, many viewers walked out. Some claimed it was too bleak, too cruel, too honest. Yet beneath its brutality, lies one of the most fearless anti-war statements in modern cinema. Adapted from Jerzy Kosinski's banned novel, it follows a nameless boy wandering through Eastern Europe during World War II. Each encounter drags him deeper into the abyss of human cruelty. There are no soldiers of glory here, only ordinary people consumed by fear, superstition, and hatred. Shot entirely in black and white, the film feels like a dream dissolving into nightmare. The long takes, the silence, the unblinking gaze all force viewers to confront the horror we often look away from. Director Václav Marhul refused compromise. He shot on real locations across 9 countries using natural light and untrained extras to blur the line between fiction and history. When it debuted in Venice, it caused outrage. Some called it exploitation. Others called it essential truth. It was censored in several countries for graphic realism, even though nothing in it glorified violence. Instead, it revealed how violence becomes ordinary when morality dies. Years later, streaming platforms gave it new life. Critics re-examined it as one of the most important European war films of the century. Its legacy lies not in comfort, but in confrontation. It reminds us that war is not just fought on battlefields, but within hearts where innocence once lived. The painted bird doesn't ask to be liked. It demands to be endured, and when it ends, the silence left behind feels heavier than any explosion. Number 8. Come and See, 1985. Few films have captured the terror of war like Come and See. Directed by Ilham Klimov, this Soviet masterpiece was nearly banned for being too real, too emotionally shattering, too human. It follows a Belarusian boy who joins partisans to fight Nazi invaders. What begins as naive adventure turns into a descent into madness. The camera stays close to his face, watching youth rot into trauma. The forests burn. Villages scream. Reality itself collapses under the weight of cruelty. Klimov endured years of censorship to make it. Soviet authorities feared it would damage national morale. He refused to soften a single frame. Every explosion, every cry was based on survivor testimony. The young actor Alexei Kravchenko was subjected to extreme emotional pressure, his hair reportedly turning gray during filming. When it finally premiered, it shocked the world. Western critics compared it to Apocalypse Now, but even darker. In the Soviet Union, it became a quiet legend, screened to limited audiences, then locked away. Only decades later did it resurface through restorations and online circulation, where modern viewers discovered its raw power. Come and See isn't just a film. It's an exorcism of human cruelty. It doesn't glorify heroism, it dismantles it. Its images stay burned into the mind long after the credits fade. Today, streaming platforms host it freely, yet few dare press play. Those who do never forget. The film's title becomes an invitation and a warning. Come and see what war truly means. Number 7. The Killing Fields, 1984. When The Killing Fields arrived, it changed how the world saw journalism and war. Directed by Roland Joffé, it chronicled the Cambodian genocide through the friendship of 2 reporters, one American, one Cambodian. What made it revolutionary was its refusal to look away from consequence. The film's realism was shocking. It didn't dramatize violence for spectacle. It showed what happens when truth itself becomes a target. Hein S. Ngor, a real-life survivor, played journalist Dith Pran, delivering one of the most powerful performances in film history. He was not an actor, yet his raw emotion tore through the screen. During production cast and crew shot in harsh tropical heat, recreating mass graves and ruined villages with painful accuracy. Several crew members collapsed from exhaustion. The film's haunting soundscape was created using real recordings from war zones. When it released, some governments tried to block it, claiming it reopened wounds best left closed. Critics accused it of being too political, too Western, too painful. But audiences responded with tears and silence. It won 3 Oscars and redefined what a war film could be. Not about victory, but survival and witness. Ngor later became an activist, using his fame to tell the world what he saw. Tragically, he was murdered in Los Angeles years later, turning his role into prophecy. Today, The Killing Fields streams freely, a monument to those whose stories were buried. It reminds us that truth can survive even when nations try to bury it, and that sometimes the bravest act in war is simply to keep telling the story. Number 6. Fires on the Plain, 1959. When Japanese director Kon Ichikawa released Fires on the Plain, audiences recoiled. This wasn't a war film of honor or heroism. It was a portrait of decay, of men stripped to their most primal selves as the world collapsed around them. The film was banned from several Asian markets for being too disturbing. Yet decades later, it would be hailed as one of the boldest anti-war masterpieces ever made. Set during the final days of World War II, the story follows a tubercular Japanese soldier wandering through the jungles of the Philippines. Starving, desperate, hallucinating, he witnesses his fellow soldiers descend into madness. What begins as a tale of survival transforms into an allegory of moral rot, where civilization rots faster than flesh. Ichikawa was already famous for The Burmese Harp, a film of sorrow and spirituality. But this time, he stripped away every trace of redemption. The film's haunting cinematography contrasts the lush jungle with the stench of death. Each step feels heavier as the soldier becomes a ghost haunting his own body. Censors tried to stop its release, claiming it dishonored Japan's wartime legacy. Ichikawa refused to cut even a frame. The film barely played in theaters, but word spread through underground screenings and university clubs. Over time, critics reappraised it, calling it one of the purest depictions of the insanity of war. Today it's free to stream and studied in film schools across the world. Fires on the Plain shows what happens when men lose not just battles, but their very souls. It doesn't shout its message. It whispers it through the eyes of a dying man crawling through mud, asking if humanity is even worth saving. Number 5. The Siege of Firebase. Gloria, 1989. At first, The Siege of Firebase. Gloria looked like another Vietnam action movie. It had the explosions, the tough talk, the military cliches, but underneath the gunfire hid a film far more honest and broken than anyone expected. Starring Arlie Ermy and Wings Hauser, it tells the story of a small Marine outpost surrounded by overwhelming Viet Cong forces during the Tet Offensive. The soldiers fight to survive, but as days blur into nights, the real enemy becomes exhaustion and despair. Director Brian Trenchard Smith shot the film on a shoestring budget in the Philippines, using real soldiers as extras. Heat and disease ravaged the set. Hauser suffered injuries while Ermy improvised most of his dialogue, using his real-life Marine experience to fuel the authenticity. The result feels painfully real, mud, sweat, and madness captured without glamour. Despite its quality, the movie was overshadowed by Platoon and Full Metal Jacket. Distributors dumped it straight to video in many countries. For years, it vanished into bargain bins. Then veterans rediscovered it, sharing tapes across forums and military circles, calling it one of the truest depictions of combat stress ever filmed. Now, freely streaming, The Siege of Firebase. Gloria has become a cult classic. It's not polished or poetic. It's raw and unflinching. It's about men holding the line long after the war inside them has already been lost. In the smoke and rain, one truth remains. No soldier ever really leaves the battlefield. Number 4. Days of Glory, 2006. Few outside France knew that over 100,000 North African soldiers fought to liberate Europe during World War II. Days of Glory brought their erased history to life. Directed by Rachid Bouchareb, the film shattered decades of silence by showing the sacrifices of Algerian, Moroccan, and Tunisian soldiers who bled for a nation that later abandoned them. The film follows 4 men from the colonies who join the Free French Army. They dream of honor and equality, but find only discrimination and exploitation. There, bravery is met with betrayal as their pay and pensions are withheld for decades. When it premiered, it faced political backlash. Some French politicians called it divisive. Others praised it as long overdue truth. The performances by Jamel Debbouze and Sami Bouajila won awards at Cannes, yet the film struggled for wide release. Certain broadcasters refused to air it, claiming it reopened colonial wounds. Behind the scenes, the cast visited real war veterans whose stories inspired the script. Many broke down on camera, describing how they were erased from textbooks and memorials. The film's emotional power even forced the French government to restore long-suspended pensions for surviving African veterans. Today, Days of Glory streams freely across the world as both art and justice. It reclaims forgotten soldiers from oblivion. It reminds us that memory is also a battlefield. and sometimes the bravest act of war is to be remembered at all. Number 3. A Midnight Clear, 1992. A Midnight Clear is one of those rare war films that whispers instead of screams. Released quietly in the early 90s, and soon forgotten, it has since become a buried treasure for those who seek the human soul beneath the uniform. Directed by Keith Gordon, the film tells the story of a group of young American soldiers stationed in the Ardennes forest during the final months of World War II. At first it feels familiar. Snow falling over tired faces, orders barked over radio static. But then the tone shifts. These soldiers are not hardened warriors. They are poets, dreamers, and boys too intelligent to believe in glory, yet too trapped to escape duty. When they encounter a small German patrol seeking to surrender, the film transforms into something intimate and tragic. The story's quiet power lies in its restraint. There are no heroic speeches, no victory marches, only fear and exhaustion, slowly turning into empathy. The Christmas snow becomes a cruel joke as humanity flickers for a moment before being crushed again by misunderstanding and fate. Behind the scenes, Gordon fought to keep his vision intact against studio demands for more action. The cast, including Ethan Hawke and Gary Sinise, filmed in freezing conditions to preserve realism. The result is haunting, a war movie about peace that was too delicate for audiences of its time. It was released in limited theaters, overshadowed by bigger blockbusters and forgotten within weeks. Yet, over time, word spread. Critics revisited it. Veterans praised its honesty. Now streaming freely, it stands as one of the most emotionally intelligent war films ever made. A Midnight Clear doesn't just depict the tragedy of battle. It shows the tragedy of kindness, crushed by machinery. It leaves you wondering how many chances for mercy the world has lost to the echo of a single gunshot. Number 2. Paths of Glory, 1957. Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory is often praised today as a masterpiece, but at its release, it was a scandal. The film was banned in France for nearly 20 years and blacklisted in several other countries. Why? Because it dared to tell the truth. That the real enemy in war is often the men giving orders, not the ones obeying them. Set during World War I, it stars Kirk Douglas as Colonel Dax, a French officer defending 3 soldiers wrongfully accused of cowardice after a failed assault. The story unfolds not in trenches, but in courtrooms, where morality and politics wage their own war. Kubrick's camera moves like judgment itself, cold, precise, unblinking. When the film premiered, generals condemned it. French officials declared it anti-military propaganda. American distributors feared backlash. Yet audiences who saw it were stunned. Kubrick had stripped away every illusion of nobility, showing command as corruption and sacrifice as waste. Behind the scenes, tension ran high. Douglas clashed with producers demanding the story remain uncut. Kubrick refused compromises even when threatened with censorship. He won, and the film became a timeless cry for justice. Though banned for years, Paths of Glory spread underground through bootleg screenings and later through home video. Critics like Roger Ebert would call it one of the most powerful anti-war statements ever filmed. Today it's freely available online and studied in universities worldwide. Its message remains as urgent now as it was in 1957. Courage means defying injustice even when the enemy wears your own uniform. Paths of Glory doesn't end with victory. It ends with silence and a haunting song reminding us that humanity's true war has always been with itself. Number 1. The Bridge, 1959. From Germany came one of the most devastating anti-war films ever made, yet few outside Europe even know its name. The Bridge, directed by Bernhard Wicki, begins where most war films end, with defeat. It tells the story of 7 teenage boys recruited into the German army during the final days of World War II. Believing they'll defend their homeland with honor, they are instead ordered to guard a small bridge no longer of military value. When the enemy arrives, the boys discover that courage without wisdom leads only to tragedy. Shot in black and white. The Bridge captures the absurdity of war through youth and innocence. Each scene unfolds like a funeral procession, the laughter of children fading beneath artillery fire. Wicki himself had survived the war and filled every frame with memories of futility. When it premiered, it shocked West Germany. Authorities feared it would reopen national wounds. Schools banned screenings. Conservative politicians called it defeatist propaganda, yet it won international awards and even an Academy Award nomination for Best Foreign Film. Behind the camera, Wiki fought censorship daily. He refused to glamorize violence or soften the despair. Many of the young actors were first-timers, their raw emotion drawn from stories their parents had lived. The authenticity made it unbearable for some viewers who saw their own sons in the characters' eyes. Over the decades, the bridge vanished from cinemas only to re-emerge through film restorations and now free streaming platforms. Critics hail it as the German counterpart to All Quiet on the Western Front, a cry of guilt, grief, and remembrance. The bridge ends with a single sentence carved into memory. This bridge is defended by children. It is not just a story about war. It is a warning that history will repeat itself until we learn to stop sending innocents to die for the mistakes of the powerful. 15 films, 15 forgotten testaments to truth. These are the stories the world tried to bury, the voices that refuse silence. Each one reminds us that war never truly ends, it only changes faces. Which of these will you watch tonight, and which will you never forget? Like, subscribe, and share the truth that history almost erased.